On July 19th, 1977, the world teacher, the Christ Maitreya, head of the spiritual hierarchy, emerged from his ancient retreat and is now in the modern world. With his disciples, the masters of the wisdom, he will inaugurate the new age of synthesis and brotherhood.
Good morning and welcome to our World Teacher Program on Wellington's Access Radio 106.1 FM, presented by Teresa and David on behalf of Share International New Zealand.
Today we present the third and final part in our series on UFOs and their spiritual mission. Our first article is an extract of a talk given by Benjamin Creme at the Transmission Meditation Conference held near San Francisco, USA in August 2009 and featured in the January-February double issue of Share International magazine. Mr. Creme begins,
"There is an enormous amount of information of one kind or another about UFOs. Some of it true, absolutely authentic, and masses of it which is utterly unreal and unauthentic. This is a huge and all-important subject."
In 1953, an Englishman named Desmond Leslie wrote a book, Flying Saucers Have Landed. He was a gifted man who wrote plays, novels and music, a cousin of Winston Churchill. Having written this book, he heard about an extraordinary man living in the US, George Adamski, who had written an article in which he claimed that he was in touch with people from other planets. Adamski said that a group of observers could vouch for his meeting with a man from Venus.
One day, by arrangement in November 1952, Adamski went into the desert, near Desert Center, California. The group of observers stayed a few hundred yards away and viewed the scene through binoculars. A spacecraft landed, of the type that flew alongside the commercial planes in the 1940s and 50s.
According to Adamski, a man came out of the spacecraft dressed in a one-piece suit. He talked to Adamski without using language, at least not immediately, but made him understand what he had to say. In fact, they had a telepathic rapport.
The man, who said he came from Venus, was wearing shoes, the soles of which were cut in such a way as to leave clear and pronounced impressions in the desert sand, which were later photographed by the group who were watching from a distance.
The word was put out that a man from Venus had landed in a spacecraft. Leslie heard about this incident and wrote to Adamski, suggesting that Adamski add his sighting report in the desert to the book that he had already written about the history of flying saucers down the ages.
Leslie's book claimed that flying saucers from other planets had been visiting Earth for thousands of years, and that there were many descriptions of these craft and artifacts on Earth that lent weight to this claim. Leslie and Adamski together published the book Flying Saucers Have Landed, 1953. And it became a bestseller. Thousands of copies were sold all over the world.
The book was taken up in a big way by the so-called New Age movement, especially in America, sometimes to its benefit and sometimes to its detriment. Adamski became famous in many parts of the world. He went on a series of lecture tours in the US, South America, Europe and elsewhere, talking about the spacecraft.
In 1955, Adamski published another book, a much longer account, Inside the Spaceships. In that book he gave an account of having been taken up in a small scout craft, like an inverted saucer with a dome, to a huge mothership. Inside the mothership he was introduced to extraordinary people, and given profound teachings by a major figure on the ship, a teacher from Venus.
That teaching was so profound it changed the thinking of thousands of people who read the book. It was not the only source of that teaching, but was very much akin to that given out by the great teachers of this world, such as Krishna, the Buddha, the Christ and Mohammed. All the great religious teachings seem to be underscored by the teachings given by the teacher from Venus. This teaching is profoundly transforming and closely resembles Maitreya's teachings.
It is, in different words perhaps, like the teaching of Maitreya when he talks about the nature of humanity as a kingdom, how we are one world, the need for sharing, justice, right relationship, and above all, the necessity that there should be no more war. This is emphasized over and over again in the teachings given by both Maitreya and the Venusian teacher. Adamski, a straightforward, genial individual, brought this teaching back home and made it known.
It fits together perfectly with the core of New Age teaching, which came from Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Helena Roerich, and Alice A. Bailey, and gave an entirely different view to humanity coming out of the war. The effects of the war were still being felt very strongly in Europe, Japan and Russia, and people were just beginning to pick up the threads of civilization again. They were looking for meaning and purpose, for guidance in the restructuring of the world.
The United Nations was formed, and in it was embedded the creed of the rights of men and women everywhere, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. The world gradually faced up to the problems that had accrued as the result of the war, the poverty of Germany, which was absolutely shattered by the Allies, the extraordinary damage and loss of life that had occurred in Russia, which set back the Russian people from their desire to create a new society after the terrible struggle with Nazism.
After the war, America created the Marshall Plan, its greatest act in many decades. The Marshall Plan transformed European industry, supplying Europe, especially West Germany, with the newest and best applications of industry that America, despite the war, had been able to create throughout the war years.
Then came two traumatic events. Berlin was divided into 4 zones, the Russian, American, British and French. In 1961 the Russians blocked their zone, making free passage between Eastern and Western Berlin impossible. America and Russia had been allies in the war against Nazism from 1939 to 1945, but became enemies in the most extraordinary ways.
America held on to its idea, if not complete, of democracy, and Russia to its idea, if not the reality, of communism. Each held fanatically to these two ideas and brought the world to a point closer than it had ever been to a Third World War. These two major powers had just emerged from the second part of the 2 great wars of the 20th century, and in 1961 stood at loggerheads.
What few people know is that President Kennedy did not bring about the cessation of hostility between Russia and America at that time. It was brought about by the space brothers of our own solar system, chiefly from Mars and Venus. They are masters of energy, as can be seen in the exploration of space by the UFOs. They have a control of energy such as we do not even know is possible, and were able to nullify the tension between the Americans and the Russians.
President Kennedy was advised by a Venusian agent living on Earth to approach the Russians in a certain way, which he did up to a point. He did it in his own American way, but he did it, and in the meantime the Space Brothers completely removed the energy from the situation and the crisis passed. That was the nearest point since the war to a breakout of a Third World War, and was only prevented by the Space Brothers.
In October 1962, there was another point at which the world came close to a Third World War. In September 1962, the Soviet government secretly delivered nuclear missiles to Cuba. When the United States intelligence discovered the weapons, the US government did all it could to ensure the removal of the missiles.
Then, in October, the Russians chose to call America's bluff to see what it would do by sending a ship loaded to the gunwales with more nuclear missiles across the Atlantic to deliver to Cuba, so that they would be on America's doorstep. The Russians made no attempt to camouflage them this time, so anyone could see they were missiles.
It was an answer to America, a provocative attempt by Russia to say, "You have surrounded Russia with missiles from Alaska to Pakistan," which America had done and still does. Pakistan is an American base and has been for years. From there, as well as from the southern border of Russia up to Alaska, Russia is completely surrounded by the missile bases of America, and has been since the 1960s.
President Kennedy, for a second time, made an announcement. He had been told by the Space Brothers, through an agent in the US diplomatic service, what to say. He did more or less say what he had been asked to say, but again in his own way, rather than in the way he was asked to say it.
As he had been asked at the time of the Berlin crisis, President Kennedy was again asked to speak to the Russians with respect and understanding, saying that he could clearly see their concerns and would seek to allay their fears. Instead, he was very outspoken and challenged Russia. I do not believe the Russians had any intention of continuing to deliver these missiles to Cuba.
I do not believe they were so foolish, so lacking in insight, to think that they could do this without being stopped. Certainly the Cubans had no wish to be obliterated from the face of the earth. So the ship turned back, as Russia, I am sure, had expected it to do in any case.
That was the second time the Space Brothers had to intervene very strongly to bring about a cessation of animosity. They do this by energy, by nullifying the negative forces, allaying the fears of the people, and bringing about the possibility of a truce, a state in which new things can grow. That is how the Space Brothers have worked all along.
Likewise, President George W. Bush, when he was in office, was informed by such an agent in the diplomatic service that there would be an attack on America, the White House, the Pentagon, and major buildings, which came to pass on 9/11. They were warned 3 months in advance of this event and did nothing about it.
That is the extraordinary thing, the difference between President Kennedy and Bush. Bush was told not to react to the events of 9/11. Of course, the first thing he did was to react immediately in the wrong way, and he declared an impossible war against terrorism, which has soured international relations ever since. He discoloured his 8 years of office by invading Afghanistan and Iraq, and he turned America from a reasonably open democratic society to a near-fascist state.
The Space Brothers do not believe in confrontation. The advice given to the people of Earth is to solve all disputes by cooperation rather than confrontation, seeing the other point of view and taking the spiritual path rather than the path of war. That is the nature of the Space Brothers. That is why they are so evolved, why they have this extraordinary technology that is so far ahead of our own and never have wars. They are way above that and have nothing but peace and goodwill for humanity.
You're listening to the World Teacher Program on Wellington's Access Radio 106.1 FM. Benjamin Creme continues. Humanity lives not only in this solar system, but also throughout the whole of cosmos. There is nowhere you can go in cosmos where you will not find human beings. There are people on all the planets of our system. The masters of our planet are in touch with the masters of the various planets, and the solar system acts as a unit. The planets are not isolated, but are in contact moment to moment, and they evolve together. If one falls behind, as this planet has done, it causes concern for the others.
The beings in the UFOs from whatever planet, mainly Mars and Venus, but others too, have a tremendous task in working to eliminate, or at least reduce, pollution. Pollution is the greatest threat to humanity. More deaths are caused by it than by any other cause. It brings about the breakdown of our immune systems, and therefore opens us to all sorts of illnesses to which we would otherwise be immune.
The space people are concerned with making this planet habitable. They go through our skies mopping up and neutralizing large amounts of the nuclear waste and general toxic filth that we pour into the atmosphere. They are not allowed by karma to clean up the planet completely, but within karmic limits they do so. Otherwise, life on this planet will be very painful indeed. More people will be dying than are dying, more people will be suffering from Alzheimer's, and daily we would be more and more asphyxiated. So we owe the Space Brothers a tremendous debt.
It is obvious, therefore, that far from being alien, malicious monsters to be feared, as they have often been presented to the public, the Space Brothers are on a spiritual mission to help in every way possible within the laws of karma to maintain the stability and future health of planet Earth.
Another part of their tremendous work for planet Earth is that they are replicating on the physical plane the magnetic energy field around the planet. Crop circles are created by people, mainly from Mars and Venus, and with a few exceptions from other planets. The majority are in the south of England, but they have been seen all around the world.
Our planet, like all planets, has a magnetic field. Its magnetic energy travels in lines and crisscrosses, and where these lines cross is formed eventually a vortex, a force centre.
The space people, in making the crop circles, are replicating on the dense physical plane these magnetic vortices in our planetary magnetic field. They do this in order to make the foundation on the physical plane for a new type of energy and a new type of technology using that energy, which eventually will be developed on this planet.
It is a gift for this coming time, the new age of Aquarius, which we are entering, a time in which tremendous new discoveries in the use of the energy of the planet and the sun will be found and adopted. This will entirely change our way of life on this planet, and will lead to a control of universal energy such as we cannot begin to imagine.
Crop circles are used because they are seasonal. The crops only have a short life cycle and then they are cut down, so you no longer see the crop circles. They grow up again the following year and the crop circles appear in the same places, because they are recreated each time in the exact same point, so that the energy is put in that field or whatever. They are helping this planet to develop the technology of the future, and also to make known quietly that they are helping us and that they are 100% friendly and harmless.
There are, of course, some hoaxes, but these are a tiny minority, perhaps 4% of the real and authentic crop circles which appear all over the world. Some people simply like to play pranks. They like to destroy evidence. They like to be cleverer than those who are making the crop circles, until the public and the media cannot make head nor tail of the whole thing. It destroys the credibility of the whole crop circle phenomenon.
If you cannot tell the difference between a fake one and an authentic one, then the authentic one loses credibility. The number of fakes is really very small because they are difficult to do. They take time and energy, and people who are going to spend that time and energy either have an overdeveloped sense of humour or else they are being paid to do it. Both things happen.
The number of crop circles is increasing all over the world. They have always been there, but only in small numbers. They are increasing because the plan of the Space Brothers, in relation to the spiritual hierarchy of our planet, is to speed up the creation of this magnetic field of energy on the physical plane on the Earth to do with the coming technology. Why now? Because our own spiritual hierarchy is returning to the everyday world.
We'll close our podcast today with an article by Benjamin Creme's master, entitled The Gathering of the Forces of Light, sourced from Share International magazine, March 2007. It begins.
Important events are taking place in many parts of the world. People everywhere will be astonished by the reports. These will include sightings in unprecedented numbers of spacecraft from our neighbouring planets, Mars and Venus in particular. Nothing like this increased activity over vast areas of the Earth will have been seen before.
Those who have steadfastly refused to take seriously the reality of this phenomenon will find it difficult to deny. More and more accounts of contact with the occupants of the spacecraft will add their testimony to the fact of their existence. Miraculous happenings of all kinds will continue and multiply in number and variety. The minds of men will be baffled and amazed by these new wonders, and this will cause them to ponder deeply.
Into this wonder-filled, wondering world, Maitreya will quietly enter and begin his open work. He will be asked to counter their doubts and fears, to explain these happenings, and he will vouchsafe their validity. These extraordinary events will continue unabated and cause many to prophesy the ending of the world. Maitreya, however, will continue in his simple way and interpret differently these events.
Thus will Maitreya encourage men to see the marvellous breadth and scope of life, the many layers of which man knows but little till now. Gently he will introduce them bit by bit to the basic truths of our existence, the laws which govern it, and the benefits achieved by living within these laws.
He will acquaint man with the vastness of our galaxy, and show that, in time, men of earth will conquer space and time. He will encourage men to seek within as well as without for the answers to their problems, and validate their constant connection to each other and to cosmos.
He will remind humanity of its long history, and of the many perils which man has overcome. He will sow the seeds of faith in our own illustrious future, and vouchsafe the eternal divinity of man.
He will show that the path of life, the evolutionary journey, leads unfailingly upwards as well as forever onwards, and that to make the journey together as brothers and sisters is the surest way and the way most lit by joy. Look then for the signs of Maitreya's entrance. Make it known, and uplift the hope of your brothers.
And that's it for today. Tune in to our next World Teacher podcast on Saturday the 21st of April at our usual time of 10 a.m.
If you would like more information on UFOs and the emergence of the World Teacher Maitreya along with the Masters of Wisdom, we can highly recommend Benjamin Creme's book, The Gathering of the Forces of Light, UFOs and Their Spiritual Mission. If you live in New Zealand, you can order this book by phoning 04 234 1133. That's 04 234 1133. Or you can write to P.O. Box 9576, Wellington.
We can also post or email our free of charge monthly newsletter, which contains a small selection of articles from the Share International magazine. Remember, there is so much more to discover on the website share-international.org.
You have been listening to Teresa and David on behalf of Share International New Zealand. Our phone number is 06 3646 101. That's 06 3646 101. You can listen again to this podcast and previous ones by visiting our new library at shareinternationalnewzealand.wordpress.com and click on the radio tab.